Hi, I'm Gus Prestera. I'm here again to talk to you about infographics. And in particular, I want to address a question that is frequently asked by students and colleagues alike. How do visuals inside of infographics actually convey meaning, implied meaning, really? So I want to address that with you. I have a couple of examples that we can walk through, very simple ones that I think will help illustrate how it is that visuals can convey meaning, even without the text and without all the other stuff that we typically see in an infographic. So here on screen, I've got 3 dots, and all 3 of them are green. They're all the same shape, the same size, spaced equally apart. And if each of those represents a concept, then what that configuration of 3 dots is telling me is that these 3 dots really are equal in importance. They're not in any particular order. They're all closely related to one another, but they are separate and distinct from each other. And so I can infer all that simply from the shape, from the colors, or the color, the spacing in between, and the overall configuration. So now if I make a little change to it, let's say I add a little bit of, make some of the green a little bit darker, add a little bit of hue there. And so now we're going from lightest to darkest green. And that's the only change that we made here. But what that begins to tell the audience is, the person who's looking at this, is that these 3 concepts seem to be sequential, or there's some sort of order or progression to it, because we're going from lightest to darkest. And then if we change the sizes of a couple of these, so that we're going from smallest to largest, as well as lightest to darkest, now that reinforces this idea that this definitely is some sort of a progression. And not only is it a progression, but possibly we're going from something that's not that fully developed to something that is fully developed, from something small to something big, to something insignificant to something really significant, etc. You get the idea, right? So it's expanding, progressing and expanding. And we're getting that simply from these 3 dots. Now, you're all familiar with the Venn diagram. And this is just another example of a Venn diagram where you have multiple concepts that overlap with one another, and in those overlaps you have some shared characteristics, right? And so we use Venn diagrams to communicate those kinds of ideas. And then we also use the concentric circles pretty frequently. The idea of a concentric circle is you've got one idea nested inside of another, possibly nested inside of another, and so on. And so these ideas are nested, they're subsumed, held within this broader concept. You go from a more narrow concept to a broader concept, and most people can recognize that simply from seeing the fact that you're using concentric circles. It's something that we're sort of conditioned to understand that way. So now let's take these 3 circles and spread them apart in a different way. Instead of lining them up in a row, we're going to array them in a circular pattern. Now this circular pattern is conveying to the audience that we have a circular process here, potentially. There's a progression here, which is signified by the different colors that we're using. We may be going clockwise or counterclockwise, depending on how we shade the colors. But we are definitely in some sort of a cyclical process, and a cyclical process is one that repeats itself, and so on. Right? So we can infer all that just from the configuration here. And then if we move the 2 bottom dots together a little bit, now we form something that is more like a triangle or a pyramid. And in a pyramid, the concepts on the bottom, the ideas on the bottom, support the ones above it. Or another way to think of it is that they form the foundation for, provide the support, provide the materials needed for the next level up, right? And so this idea that there's a hierarchy is communicated by a pyramid. And just by moving these dots around a little bit, we start to make it look a little bit more like a pyramid, and now these concepts start to take on the characteristics of a pyramid. So hopefully you can see from these simple examples that just even using 3 little dots, we can convey a whole lot of meaning without even having any text in there, without really providing any additional content. So imagine now if we have the full arsenal of colors and shapes and sizes and spacing and configurations to work with, we can tell a really complex and robust story through our infographics without even relying all that much on text. I hope you found this helpful. Thank you.